Tonight on EWTN Live, we will talk about some of the most interesting and influential people in history and how their decisions to follow God or reject Him affected their own lives and the history of the world. So please stay with us. Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa. Welcome to EWTN Live, which is our chance to bring you guests from all over the world. First, I want to mention that today is the feast of Saint Denis, or as he was known back then, Dionysius. He was the Bishop of Paris, and he was martyred back somewhere in the second half of the 3rd century, somewhere between 250, 270. We're not sure the exact date. You know, it's interesting because Paris was part of the Roman Empire, Gaul, and this was the period of the beginning of the fall of the empire. It was just starting to have internal stuff. And while they were fighting amongst themselves as emperors were deposing each other, you then saw this that, well, I can't get rid of my opponents, so I'll attack the church. And that's oftentimes what they did. That's sometimes the way dictators and authoritarian people think. St. Dionysius, though, is better remembered than the emperors under whom he lived or who ordered his death. And we who seek to be faithful to Jesus will be remembered first by God, and who knows, by history, because we were faithful. Now, tonight, we have a guest who is a good friend of mine and a great Catholic writer, one of my really favorites. He's done a number of books, which I cite frequently and recommend to many of you in this audience. And he is here this week at EWTN, working on a new and unique project for EWTN television. It's called Saints versus Scoundrels, where various saints and not so saintly people debate each other about the decisions they made for God or against God. So please welcome our guest, Dr. Benjamin Weicker. You know, Ben, you've been doing this kind of work for some years now, of taking on various things. Like one of my favorite books I've recommended often to the audience is Architects of the Culture of Death. What a great book. And your book on Darwin and so many others that you've done, are just illuminating as to what these people were like that came up with the way a lot of modern people think. And you're very good at understanding what they said, being very clear to present that, but then showing that at certain points they became dangerously dumb. And I love it. I love it. So now you're here doing this series. Have you done series for us before?
Not this long. I've appeared, but never done a series. And this series, Saints versus Scoundrels, actually came from Architects of the Culture of Death. That was the start of it.
Right.
So that gave us a kind of an idea about what we wanted to do. And the only thing is, I didn't just want to do bad guys. Architects of the Culture of Death.
I know, but
Kind of a downer. I mean,
but they're down in a way. But villains are always the most interesting characters in a movie.
Well, yes, true. But saints can be interesting. That was that when I signed on for this. I said I want interesting saints because they are. They're exciting. They're real. They have they're three-dimensional, and so that's the goal of the series. We want these people to be super alive, saints and scoundrels. And so we're going to have three-dimensional evil and good to really give an idea of the personalities that shape history, for better or worse.
Now, in terms of this, so that folks understand what we're talking about, because not everybody has gotten a chance to read Architects of the Culture of Death. Just briefly, what did you do in that book?
Well, I did that with Don DeMarco.
Right.
And he's a wonderful...
You both were on as guests when it came out?
Yeah, that's right. What we did is we took I don't know how many, I think it was ultimately about 23 architects of the culture of death, just as it says. Who were the key figures who truly gave us the distortions about human nature, about male and female, about sexuality, about... government, history, the whole, when architects of the culture of death define things, that's why we call them architects, architectonic, that it twists everything about the culture, from literature to architecture, whatever you put in the blank. So we have all kinds of figures in there, some of whom Don DeMarco worked on and some of whom I worked on. So those were the, if you say, can you pick 20, 25 figures who really gave us what John Paul II argued was a culture of death. That is not just a bad law here, Roe v. Wade or something like that. It's a whole culture,
a whole worldview
aimed at destruction of human nature.
And then convinced a lot of other people.
Yes, and convinced a lot of other people.
This sounds like a good idea.
This is good. Yeah,
let's do communism. Oh boy.
And how bad does the destruction have to get before you finally say, I don't think this is working. No, I don't think this is working. So you do see the kind of destruction wrought by communism. It seems to go on and on and on. Even when you're talking about tens of millions of corpses. At what point do you say, this is not good? This is bad.
There's a great website at the University of Hawaii. It's called just hawaii.edu/powerkills. And what it does is list all the atheistic governments that committed democide. And it's not tens of millions. It's hundreds of millions killed by atheists in the 20th century. And I think it's close to 300 million.
Yeah, and that is an important thing for Christians to understand, because we often get the bad rap. Oh, you Christians, you caused all the wars back then.
Well, they did that too. They went through all the Christian wars.
It's not that,
it's bad.
It's bad, yeah, it's bad, but not that bad.
In 2,000 years, the number was 2.6 million.
Yeah, way below.
Compared to 300 million for atheists.
Yeah, it's amazing. But Christians need to know that, and that's one of the reasons, books like Architects of the Culture of Death, where I did 10 books that screwed up the world, another one sort of like that. Giving people an understanding of how it is that ideas have consequences and bad ideas have, guess what? Bad consequences. Okay, so ideas do matter, and you have to pay attention to those things. But the nice thing about the series, Saints versus Scoundrels, is you see it embodied. Ideas just don't float around and land on things and make them bad like bacteria. It's actually people thinking this way, living this way, incarnating it for better or worse, and then passing it on. Convincing others, yeah. And so it does spread like a contagion, and it becomes incarnated in society, and you get an actual culture that is defined by a kind of self-destruction.
Now, that's the bad guys. These are the scoundrels.
That's the scoundrels, yeah.
But, and again, scoundrels in the movies are always interesting. But Scarlett O'Hara is far more interesting than Melanie. But here, we also want to see that the saints, and you're going to be talking about saints who are more interesting than either Scarlett O'Hara or Melanie.
If that, yes, combined.
Yes.
Combined. Well, we begin with St. Augustine. And he is, if St. Augustine can't interest you, then you're gone, you're dead.
Yeah.
I mean, yet he's as lively as one can imagine.
Yes.
And so what I wanted to do when I was writing the script was reach into this guy's life as a bishop, as a person, bring out his personality in that short time that we have, and do the same with the first villain, who's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And I know you have some villainous things to say about him.
Yes, I do. Yes,
I knew you were bursting at the seams to tell us about that, but we want
But one of the keys, that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah.
Augustine's greatest, most popular book was,
The Confessions.
and Jean-Jacques Rousseau's greatest book was,
The Confessions.
he wrote his own Confessions.
Yeah, he wrote his own, against St. Augustine's.
Right.
That's why we started that. It's such an obvious bang. And Rousseau was one of those scoundrels who believed that Christianity was a mistake. Go back to pagan Rome. Get rid of Christianity. And so he provides the anti-Augustine.
As a matter of fact, he reminds me of this time that a bunch of folks were over at a Protestant church revival meeting, and there was a come down to the altar call, and this guy confessed his sins, and some of his friends were walking, and I said, he wasn't confessing. He was bragging. And that's Rousseau.
That's Rousseau, yeah.
He ain't confessing, he's bragging.
He's bragging, yeah. And his Confessions, even today, is an interesting read. It's not on-air reading. It's not on-air. He shocked the people at the time, but that was his goal. He wanted to say, there is no sin. We are naturally good, and these things I'm confessing, which appear to be sins, are merely false, and most of them are due to society. You know, human beings are naturally good.
Especially the church.
Well, of course.
See,
course.
this is one of the things that's so key about his role. He comes from that Calvinist background.
Yeah, Geneva.
That said everything is evil. Man is totally evil, not fallen. That's Catholic doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
But John Calvin said, no, the man is totally depraved. And he said, I'm totally good. We're all good.
Yeah, the other way.
He goes, instead of coming to the sensible center of truth, he goes to the other extreme.
Yeah, and that's an excellent thing to point out, because he did grow up in Geneva, and so you have one side of a heresy causing the other side to bounce back. So you lose what the Catholic Church was trying to hold, and historically, that's the unfortunate thing. Is in a way, we have the age of Augustine replaced by the age of Rousseau. You know, Rousseau is our first great sexual revolutionary in every awful way. So we whether we know it or not, we live and breathe sort of Rousseau's culture, not St. Augustine's.
It's something that would be very surprising in the modern world, but he was addicted to pornography back in the early 1700s, as had his father been. They couldn't get over that, and he began to think the way he acted.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. In other words, the thinking forms its way around the desires, and the truth becomes distorted in our script for Saints versus Scoundrels. That's one of the things that St. Augustine points out, is that when your love is distorted, disordered, it's actually going to disorder your intellect. And so what you have is somebody with a very powerful mind. Nobody is going to make the claim that Rousseau was a dummy. No, brilliant. But you see it form around that disordered love. And that was part of it. If people don't know, there was pornography in the 1700s, almost as soon as the printing press came in. But there's actually also pornography in ancient Rome.
Sure there was.
And it was Christianization that actually had caused pornography to disappear as Europe became Christianized, and it reappeared again when you have a kind of repaganization of Europe. And the Enlightenment, that's what you get.
Well, yeah, again, it's so fascinating that his ideas develop, and eventually in the French Revolution, they deify reason. They enthrone a woman as Lady Reason on the main altar, and then immediately begin the reign of terror and a bloodbath.
Yeah, exactly. And did it in accordance with his philosophy, because Rousseau very clearly stated in another book, The Social Contract, not the Confessions, that Christianity was irreconcilable with a good state. You simply had to purge it and start a civil religion, and that means a natural religion based in reason, not reason, but reason as he understood it, defined as a kind of a natural religion against a supernatural religion, and that meant historically, for the advance of human beings, you had to purge Christianity, and especially Catholicism.
Yes.
Especially Catholicism. So it isn't accidentally, he didn't just kill people randomly, went after the church.
Well, see, and we did a show recently about the massacres, the one of the first modern genocides
Yeah.
of the Vendée.
The Vendée, yeah.
That part of Western France where the Catholics were just,
Yeah.
murdered en masse
Yeah.
for defending their right to freedom of religion, to practice their religion.
Yeah, well, and you have a lot of talk about freedom of religion, even in, on into the Third Republic in France. But what it really means is freedom from Christianity.
Especially Catholicism.
Yeah, especially Catholicism. It means taking down the crucifixes. It means purging Catholicism from the public schools in France. So it isn't
Making
really.
sure there's no prayer in the schools.
You got no prayer in school. If that doesn't sound familiar, in a lot of ways, we're going the way of France.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It was a judge, because one of the other things too is, I don't know, I never found this out, was Rousseau involved in the Masonic Lodge movement in France?
I don't. It seems reasonable because many of the Enlightenment figures believed that they wanted to go back before Christianity to pick up this ancient natural religion, usually based in Egypt, and it was so prevalent.
Yeah.
And he went in all these circles. I can't imagine that he wouldn't have,
because it was very popular.
It was very
France.
popular, yeah. But people don't understand that over there it really meant we have an international organization to destroy Christianity and
Right.
reimpose. It's not just the Raccoon Club or the Glee Club or something. It's not just a place to hang out on Saturday night.
See, and this is,
conspiracy.
one of the things that especially Americans don't always understand, that the Masonic Lodge in the continent promoted these ideas and aggressively used violence to attack Catholicism and blame Catholicism for everything. They saw themselves as Enlightenment.
Yeah, yeah.
And the period when the church brings knowledge to the barbarians, they call that the Dark Ages.
The Dark Ages.
They named it the Dark Ages.
Retroactively.
Nobody else did.
They weren't sitting around at that time. It's retroactively imposed, and there you got one more example, and this is why Catholics need to know their history of being presented a history in a distorted way, in a way that it transforms our understanding of what actually occurred in the past, so we actually lose the past. We have a fake past we're holding behind us. And a lot of those distortions are caused by a strong anti-Catholic bias, and it was obviously very apparent in the French Revolution. I mean, they really had a kind of an intellectual propaganda machine to do that.
And it was here too. I mean, anti-Catholicism in the colonies was brought over from England, even when Maryland colony became a Catholic colony. Puritans moved from New England, took over, and then made Catholicism illegal. Whereas when the Catholics ran it, it was the first colony, even before Pennsylvania colony, to have freedom of religion.
Yeah.
That was it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And in that sometimes the tension between democracy and liberal ideas and Catholicism is oftentimes misunderstood here.
Yeah, absolutely.
When the Pope, like Pope Pius IX and others condemned that, they were thinking of Rousseau.
Well, it is that kind of liberalism.
That's what they meant.
Yeah, that's what they meant. And we have a kind of a translation problem with the term liberalism. I dealt with this in another book, Worshipping the State, where say, we just need to get clarity about this term. And so what I did was I took readers back actually to the early 1500s to Machiavelli. So I'm going to give you a new definition of liberalism, which can make sense of all these kinds of variations and kind of clear up some of the fog. Can't clear up all the fog, with some of the fog, saying, you know what, the origin of the kind of liberalism you're worried about was the notion that we would be better if we were liberated from Christianity so we could be liberated to enjoy this world. The two went together in a kind of movement for Machiavellian people that came after him. Rousseau was part of that culmination. And what we call left liberalism today partakes in that heartily, the notion that an advance of human nature, an advance of human history really means to remove Christianity, to de-Christianize, and to affirm this worldly bodily existence as our defining goal. And of course, when that occurs in regard to the state, we get a situation much like occurred in the French Revolution. You get a state that's antagonistic to the church. There's, okay, we're not being hunted down yet, that's good, but something like the HHS mandate trying to impose on Catholic institutions, you will pay for things you morally reject, is an example of a liberal state in the sense in which I just stated it, against the church. It's a persecution. It's just like what occurred, say, in the French Revolution when you have them imposing non-Christian marriage laws and allowing divorce. So you have that kind of clash again between two rival views of morality, two worldviews of culture, death, culture, life.
Yeah. And we even just this past Sunday, we saw how the administration, it seems to try to put pain because of this government shutdown, said, priests can't celebrate Mass. So the priests at the military bases said, well, we don't want to be paid. Just let us celebrate Mass. No, if you come here and say Mass, you will be punished and arrested.
Yeah.
Now,
that's nonsense.
That's absurd.
Yeah, that's absurd. You're not costing you anything with government
You're
shutdown.
trying to serve the men and women who laid down their lives to give us the freedom of religion, and from them, the government says, we're going to take away their freedom of religion.
Yeah.
So odd.
Well,
so odd.
It's going.
But that's where liberalism gets twisted as to destroy freedom.
Yeah. And if you go back historically, it's actually the church that gave us the distinction between political power and the church itself. And it did it. It gave us this distinction, what we call church and state, so that the state wouldn't violate the church. That's the kind of stepping over the boundary. You can't celebrate Mass. The state is telling you can't celebrate Mass. That's the kind of violation back in the 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th centuries in which the church said, no, we are independent from the state. You have your own function, we have ours. So we're the ones that are actually bringing this great gift to the state, saying we have the distinction between church and state, but that means that, okay, we aren't going to make a state church, but you, the state, cannot keep us from, for example, saying the Mass. That's out of bounds.
That's why the First Amendment does not have separation of church and state in it. That was in the Constitution of the Soviet Union.
Of the Soviet Union. And France.
And
Third Republic, yes.
So
and
they
always
had
with that effect, too. Always with that effect. Persecution.
Exactly.
Always with that effect.
Whereas our Constitution says the government cannot establish a religion or, unlike what they did on Sunday, interfere in the practice thereof, or the HHS mandate. And when Jefferson wrote that statement, that there's a wall of separation between church and state, it was to protect the Baptists in Connecticut from interference by the state. Not to protect the state from the church.
And it was used, whatever Jefferson's intentions, maybe we'll never know them, but I think that this is clear. When it was used, this was made into a piece of the Constitution, even though it doesn't exist, by the Supreme Court in 1947 in a case called Everson. Say, but it isn't in there. But he wanted it in there. He wanted it in there, he put it in there.
And you know who added that, don't you?
Hugo Black.
Who was a big anti-Catholic Mason. And Ku Klux Klan.
I was going to say KKK. He was lovely history.
He was put in the Supreme Court by Franklin Roosevelt, even though he was a leader of the Ku Klux Klan and a strong anti-Catholic Mason.
And that, in fact, that case itself, oddly enough, a lot of people don't know this, it smacks of anti-Catholicism in another sense, is that many Protestants had affirmed it because the case is about not giving aid to Catholics.
Right.
It was the problem wasn't actually at that time for most people that there was a connection to religion in schools. It was the wrong religion.
Right.
We don't want to give money to that Catholics, but actually, as it turns out, it backfired. Now Protestants are saying, "Gosh, I wish I hadn't done that," because they're after us now,
Right.
which in a way is good. In this sense, Catholics and Protestants are now able to come together and say, we got more to fear from them than we do from each other. Let's sit around the table.
Exactly. And that's been one of the great things that, more and more evangelicals, Pentecostals, and Catholics realize we share a lot of cultural values and morals, differences in theology that we can deal with among ourselves, but we need to stand together in terms of dealing with this in Rousseauan type of encroachment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important that Rousseau was one of those key figures that made it clear that, as he put it in his terms, you need to force people to be free. And what does that mean? It means you need to force people to freely accept basically this liberal plan that I'm putting forth as the general will of the state. But it isn't a matter of us coming to deliberate about things. It isn't even a matter of us using our reason. It's a matter of us imposing, and we will call that freedom. That's kind of that nice double speak. You don't want to be free? We'll make you free.
Right. And it's something that is I think it's so important to understand. It's not about one political party or another political party. This is an ideology you find in both of our parties.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
I wouldn't trust either one of them to be in charge of the IRS. Right now this administration is abusing it, but do you think that the others will not?
Yeah.
There's no reason to think that.
Yeah. Same steering wheel, and the people doing it are a lot the same. And I pointed that out again, worshiping the state too, because a lot of people wonder why it is that the Democrats and Republicans, is there that much difference? Actually, there's not. They both have their background historically in this kind of liberalism I'm describing, coming from an ultimate putting Christianity to the side or subordinating it to the state. And if we understand that, we can step back and above and actually bring these forgotten Catholic principles to allow us to see things a lot more clearly. A lot more clearly.
Perhaps it will be the reintroduction of Catholic ways of thinking.
Yeah, I do.
That will help us preserve the Constitution from those who would distort it to get more power over us.
Yeah.
And that's one of the tasks. But one of the people who does have power over me is my producer. It is time for a break. We will come back in 2 minutes because we want your comments as well as those of our studio audience. So please stay with us. Thank you. First of all, I want to let you know that we have a wonderful audience here. It's very large because these are the folks that bring you Catholic radio. And we have the studio filled with them. They're here for a meeting, a conference that they're going to have with various speakers, and to learn more about what they're doing and stuff, and share with everybody else what they're doing. So, good for you all. That's one thing about radio. You don't get to see their faces. But this is they.
They brought them all. They all brought faces.
They all brought faces.
They all brought faces.
But we'd also love to have you come and join us to be part of a pilgrimage here. If you can do so, please call our pilgrimage department at 205-279-2966. Or you can go on the internet, www.ewtn.com. And they'll give you all kind of information about scheduling for programs, masses, directions to Hansville, and all the rest of it. Love to have you come. You ready for some questions?
I'm ready.
Giddy up.
I'm suited up.
Start off with a caller here. We have John on the line. Hello, John.
Hello, Father Mitch.
How you doing?
Oh, okay. How about yourself?
Just full of spit and vinegar?
You are. Amen.
Now, what can we do for you today?
Well, I have a question. I like the guest, too. He has a wonderful mind for the books and series. No problem. When France got paganized, how did they, particularly with the laity, turn it around to where they got back to a more pro-life culture and society and back to the church? And thank you.
Thank you very much, John.
How did they or how should they?
Yes, how did they?
Well,
here's the question.
Yeah.
Did they?
Did they? Well, let me start off with some good news because it's helpful. I met a couple of guys that came from France when I was out speaking. I think it was up at Washington, and they were really full faith Catholics. Mm-hmm. Real Joan of Arcers. So that was good. And
that's a growing.
That's
movement.
a growing thing because
Yep.
where but in France would you find? Now this was a complete shock to me. Remember their big march against gay marriage? Mm-hmm. That way bigger than happened in the United States.
Right.
That's hopeful. When I saw that, I thought, was that France?
Yeah.
Was that France?
It was.
And that was France. So there is hope. But France has had trouble I think they've had trouble all the way back into their Gallican church years.
Yes.
As soon as you distorted the Catholic faith and made it a kind of a statish religion.
Yeah. That was always a problem.
That was always a problem. So
Yeah.
they always had a problem with that. And you did have problems within when you get a Gallican church, you kind of absorb.
But by the way, Gallican church means that it's controlled
by the
state.
By the state,
by the
basically,
king
yeah.
in the old days.
They want it to be a French church,
Right.
not the Catholic Church in France. So it becomes a national church. That's probably the best way to see it. And when that happens, it follows state policy, and you get a subordination of the church to the state, and then you start to absorb into the state apparatus the hierarchy. Right. And then you've got bishops that are basically appointees who are, and that's a problem of the state, and they're getting rich, and you have a corrupted government, and you have the French Revolution.
Even at the parish levels.
Yeah, parish levels.
The parishes were also where you got the state working through the parishes as the local organization. So that was problematic.
It's a mess.
But France is going through a certain revival of their Christian faith.
Yeah, let's pray about that.
Very much pray because if they don't, then they won't be. Atheist either.
There's only one way to go, and that's up
Islamic.
for them. Yeah, that's up. Yeah, or Islamic. But
because
that is what they are. Yeah,
they're having the children.
Yeah, and Catholicism will, if they embrace that again, I think they might be realizing that. Oh my gosh, I guess we can't take all this for granted.
Right.
All this that built this great country, we can't take it for granted. We'll soon be Islamicized.
Exactly. A question from our studio. Sir, where are you from?
Houston, Texas.
And which station are you with?
KSHJ 1430 AM on the Guadalupe Radio Network.
There you go. So what's your question?
Dr. Weicker, I know you wrote that great book with Scott Hahn on atheism, and you mentioned earlier about how Rousseau wanted to free us from the church so that we could be freed for our disordered passions. Mm-hmm. What I want to know is how is atheism, modern militant atheism, really sort of taking his cause to the next level?
Wow. That's a good question because we've all seen in the last, 10, 15 years.
15,
it's not that atheism never existed. It's that now it has sprouted wings, you might say, of certain kinds.
I would say it has sprouted $100 bills.
$100 bill. Yeah, I was going to say there's a lot of money being thrown in there, and they are very savvy in getting the word out and setting up organizations and having international meetings. And the money. You can't get around the money. So that's one of the difficulties. As Scott and I both said in that book, Answering the New Atheism, this is old hat. In fact, it's not even good old hat. There were better atheists, back with Nietzsche and better atheists, way better atheists.
Those were the days, yeah. I mean, then
they don't
that
have
was
good
an
atheists
atheist
now.
you could argue with.
There you go. Yeah,
These
they don't
guys
have
are
them like
dumbos.
they're plastic. Yeah,
But the new atheists don't have arguments against God.
they got the
just
money.
hate him.
Yeah, they just hate him.
They
That's
just
right,
hate
yeah,
God
yeah,
and Christianity.
Yeah, and
Sort of
Dawkins. Dawkins is a good
Rousseau.
example. Sort of like Rousseau. Yeah, but Rousseau was a profound atheist. What you have around is not a profound. Richard Dawkins is not profound. No.
Christopher Hitchens.
No.
I mean, Christopher Hitchens could say that the most evil person of the 20th century was Mother Teresa of Calcutta.
Yeah, and wrote a book against.
He wrote a book.
He wrote a book
stating that.
Yeah.
And you say, you think of the competition.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Adolf
yeah.
Hitler,
Mao.
Joe Stalin, Mao.
Yeah.
But they were all atheists, so I guess
Yeah.
they couldn't be all bad.
Well, one of the ways they got around it is, they treated communism like a religion. Therefore, they were religious. You're saying, wait.
Not
Wait.
fast.
Shell game. That was not good. And so, you have to, when they say that to me, I say, man up. I'll talk about the Inquisition. I'll talk about the Crusades. I'll talk about the 30 Years' War. We can own up to any of our sins and do it manfully, but you got to man up too.
No, that's not their strength.
That's not their strength.
No. Let's call over to go to Linda. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Father Pacwa.
Where are you from?
Upstate New York, Albany Diocese.
Great, welcome. And what's your question?
My question, I have an aunt who professes to be an atheist. And last week she made a comment to me that blew my mind a bit. She said that democracy and Judeo-Christianity could not coexist, and that was the problem for our country. And I felt like it was totally the opposite. You couldn't have democracy without the Judeo-Christianity. I just wanted to hear your comment.
I'm afraid I have to agree. Here's
with whom? The aunt
Well,
or her?
sorry. Well, I like to play both sides, just so you never know what's going to come out.
I agree.
I agree. Next. Oh. Well, what you have with democracy is not some kind of surefire way to come up with the right answer. It's one mode of government. And if you have people who are morally degraded, it'll turn bad. You have to have a moral substrate there. Just a mere mechanism of government is not going to save anyone. So to choose democracy over aristocracy or kingship or something like that, what matters is the character of the people. If you have a government by one person, he can be a king, he can be a tyrant, he can be Henry VIII, or he can be a wonderful king. Democracy is the same thing. You can have a malicious majority. Rousseau was the great proponent of majority rule, the general will. Okay, so don't just say the majority rule. That doesn't guarantee you a good government. The question is the character, and the character is what Christianity offers to all governments. We will transform the character of your peoples, so whatever the structure of this government is, it'll be way better than it would have been.
Also, and this is something I would say very strongly and clearly to your aunt, the Declaration of Independence has, at the beginning and at the very end, two key statements that every person has inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, if I ended it there, I would sound like President Obama. He always stops there. But that's not where the Declaration stops. And your aunt probably stops there like he does. The issue is that it goes on that these inalienable rights are from your Creator. He doesn't include those words, and a lot of other people stopped including those words. And if those inalienable rights do not come from your Creator, then your aunt would have to assume that they come from the state. And if the state gives them, they can take them away. And I trust God to give me my inalienable rights. I do not trust the government of any country to give me my rights. I'm born with that dignity. And then and finally, the Declaration of Independence concludes by saying we will be judged by the Creator for what we do here. Both of those statements are key to the very existence of this democracy. And your aunt needs to think that through. Let's go to a question here from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
Sacramento, California.
And which radio station are you with?
Santísimo Sacramento.
All right, cool. And so yours is a Spanish language?
Spanish radio, yes.
See, that's what a lot of folks don't realize. EWTN also provides 24-hour Spanish radio as well as English. So what's your question?
You know, my question is about, everybody knows here about the Cristero War in Mexico, long ago. And now we know that our constitution in Mexico is what is called Mason constitution. That's how the government is working now. But what happened over there is happening now. Now, my question for you, doctor, is all this isms, you know, liberalism, communism, socialism, what relationship has with the Freemasonry? Because that happened in Mexico compared with what is happening right now today in the United States.
Yeah, that's a complex history. What is the relationship of liberalism to the Masonic movement? And if you go back, I think you have to go back far enough. You really need to pull things back into the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, when you see this new view that Christianity was basically a defective turn away from the wisdom of the pagans. And so you have a re-embracing of pre-Christian pagan wisdom, culture, and religion. And I think that's where you get that Masonic connection. People misunderstand the deist movement in Europe. They think deism is is sort of Christianity when things fade, sort of from 3 to 1. You know, but that isn't what happens. Deism was constructed to displace Christianity. And Rousseau understood that clearly. That's why his civil religion, he's just very clear about it. You cannot have Christianity in a state. It's then a house divided. And he says, when the cross came in, it drove out the eagle, meaning Rome. And that is, Rousseau says, we need the eagle back where the religion served the state. So one of the things that kind of movement in liberalism does is it either excludes the church or subordinates it, but it will never let it exist independently. That's what it doesn't like. So you can do all, you know, it's one of the freedom of worship. Why are we saying that? No, well, because that means that you can't do all the other things that the church says. Although the church has a very definite moral doctrine. You can't stand on that. But freedom of worship makes it all fluffy.
See, that was one of the tricks that that Lenin did.
Yeah.
He said we have freedom of worship in Soviet Union. And the Catholics said, oh, that means unlike the Tsar, we'll be able to worship. That's not what it meant.
That's not what it meant. No.
It meant religion can't walk outside the church door.
Yeah, or you get shot. Exactly. And pretty soon we'll make it into a museum anyway. So that's a very important thing to understand, the kinds of tricks that occur with that. And certainly in Europe, especially very clearly, that Masonic movement had that background in liberalism, meaning, again, let's liberate history from Christianity. It was a mistake.
Yep. Another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
Mattapoisett, Massachusetts.
And you're with one of the radio stations?
Near one of them, Cor Marie in New Bedford, Mass.
Okay.
Yes.
And your question?
Doctor, you seem very prolific in philosophy, politics, but I'm wondering how your faith informs your writing.
Well, sort of like air informs my writing. It's really, I mean, once you become Catholic, everything you just think that way, and that's how you're going to approach things. So one of the things that it does is, in becoming Catholic, is it lifts you up above. So now I don't look at American history from being only an American. You have to think like the church does. The church looks at the world. It looks at 2,000 years of history. It looks back 1,800 years before that into Jewish history. So it's that lifting up that allows us to more clearly see things. And that's, I think, one of the greatest gifts that our faith gives us. It's deep, it's rich, it's got the wisdom. So for me, it informs all aspects of it, even and especially when I'm writing a text which doesn't look like it talks about Catholicism. I write a lot of stealth Catholicism text. If we can just keep, so I don't know whether I should name them or not, Worshiping the State, but cold, that's good stuff. You know, where you can teach about natural law, you can teach church doctrines as long as you never mention them. And it draws, because they see the wisdom of it. As long as you don't say the church, they go, boy, that's a smart idea. You know, just don't tell them the Catholics. You know, but you know, it draws people in. So I've had perfectly reasonable.
But it does so not because
you're not forcing it on us. Reason.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
It makes
and not only that,
sense.
it's true. Yeah. It's one added benefit of being Catholic. So it's Catholic and it's true too. So and they do, and they listen to that. So I've had people whose traditions actually would, for example, have them reject the natural law, embrace it as long as they don't tell them it's Catholic. You know, just bring them up to it, and then I guess they're going to eventually find out.
Yes.
You know, somebody will tell them.
But you know, that's precisely one of the problems that Justice Thomas runs into.
Yeah.
He states, because he's a very clear legal thinker,
Yeah.
and he uses natural law as a principle.
Yeah.
And they don't want,
No.
the liberals don't want, and again, liberal the way you mean, I don't mean again,
yeah,
a political party. It's liberal thinking people are themselves, you know, typically relativistic.
Yeah, exactly. And no one showed that, like Joe Biden. You remember that when they were grilling Clarence Thomas, and you know, well, do you believe in the natural law? Do you believe in the natural law? And Biden said, well, we can't have you in here because that means you think there's a law above the law of the state. And right there, you just want to say,
Yes.
what? Yes, I do.
Now that you bring it up.
Especially because you're in there.
But isn't that exactly what
Yeah.
was behind the Nuremberg trial?
Yeah.
There are laws, there is a law,
yeah.
superior to the state,
Yeah.
in that humanity can judge evil actions on the basis of that natural law.
Yeah.
Whether your government says it's okay to murder
Yeah.
on a mass scale, we will still judge you by that natural law. And that is precise. And again, that relativistic mentality always, they don't have any principles.
No, and proud of it.
And if there's no absolute truth,
Yeah.
then never, ever forget that relativists are reduced to might makes
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. There's nothing left.
You can't judge on principle. I'm right because I can beat you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is the way liberal thinking is.
Yeah. Going all the way back to Machiavelli.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter whether it's one man, you know, a tyrant saying it, or the majority. Majority isn't right just because it's the majority. Even the majority has to answer to the law above every state.
Yes.
You know, this is what human nature is. You can't do these things to human beings. I don't care if somebody votes it in or not. You can't do
Exactly.
it. You can't do it.
Exactly. Sir, where are you from?
From Mobile, Alabama.
And what station are you with?
WNGL Archangel Radio 1410 AM.
See, these guys know this stuff.
Yeah.
So what is your question?
My question is, what do you think about the idea of scoundrels as role models showing us what not to do in life?
The antithesis. A lot, actually. This is going to sound weird. I became Catholic in a way through one of the greatest scoundrels. I'm sure it wasn't his intention. Of course, he's been dead a long time. Thomas Hobbes. Thomas Hobbes, writing in the 1651, I think he wrote the Leviathan. He's the arch materialist, arch anti-Catholic, and I realized how bad everything about his, just from top to bottom, everything. This is, if you could come up with the worst philosophy in the world, brilliantly so, that would be it. but the opposite of it was the Catholic Church. You know, I could just see this was the anti-form. And so oddly enough, yes, you can see when you see somebody making a brilliant error, you can see the truth a lot better. Now, I wouldn't take him as a role model. I think that might be the wrong way to say it, but as a model of what not to be, you can see the disintegration of a soul and its effect on other people. That's very important. And what's too often occurs with these great figures, and I tried to do this in Architects of the Culture of Death and in 10 Books That Screwed Up the World as well, is, show them, oh, this guy is really, you see how bad he is, see how his ideas inform our thinking today and even yours. All of a sudden we have met the enemy and he is us. So you see it really clearly in him, and all of a sudden, bam. I didn't know that this man's ideas formed even the way I approach problems. And you can go through a good catharsis that way, clean out your system. And that's one of the reasons, of course, we don't want just scoundrels in Saints versus Scoundrels, because you get that really good image. So, well, no, we need both. This is what it means to go very badly wrong, but this is what it means to go right.
And I think, with that question, it's very important to make sure you know what you do want, and not make as a guidance for your life what you don't want.
Yeah.
Because then your opponents define you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas the key of our faith is that God reveals what he does want, for us to be in his image and likeness.
Yeah.
And that's what we do want. And then these others are just sort of things like those little bumpers, in when you're playing those games. I have another question from our studio audience. Sir, where are you from?
San Antonio.
And which radio station?
Guadalupe Radio Network, KJMA, 89.7.
Woohoo! Get a lot of calls from y'all.
All right, praise God. Dr. Weicker, I'm curious as to the intent of the series, what you want people to take away from it, and might there be a study set or something that we can follow along, that way you can make sure the intent. Yeah, make sure the intent.
I'll be right back. Yeah, well, yes, no, there really should be something like that. I'm still cooking that up now. I'm really cooking that up, but I've got that suggestion. We want people.
You need him as an agent?
I don't know. Does he have a radio show? Okay. I think we do hope that it will be a lively teaching series. We want it to be, and we got some really good people working all the way around from top to bottom. We got professional actors in, Lamar and Jeremy, who are here tonight, sneaking around in the audience, not wearing their outfits, as Augustine and Rousseau, make us do a really top job.
Yes.
And so we want people, first of all, to find this so interesting that whether you're Catholic or not, you're watching it. Okay, so not just Catholics watching, people say, oh, come over to this, I saw this great thing on EWTN. So that's the quality we're shooting when we do this thing. But then we want, obviously, people to be drawn into the depth of both of these characters, because in a way, evil's attractive. This is a real person. The scoundrel's a real person. But the saint is a real person too. You say, with all the bumps and warts and so on, but there is a real difference between good and evil, and we can see them embodied in real lives. We can enter into them dramatically and understand, at least to some respects, the depth of this great battle.
Now, when you do this, do you work to make Rousseau sound dumb?
No. Oh, no.
You try to present his arguments?
We want him, in a way, his ideas could not have become effective on such a great scale if he weren't intellectually charming.
Yep.
You know what I mean? In other words, why don't present somebody whose arguments are so dumb that nobody would fall for them. You want somebody who really did have that kind of an effect. And the reason is, what he says is very attractive. And he was a beautiful writer. So you could be drawn into this. I mean, why else would so many people be drawn in? Right. We want them to be drawn in, but say, yes, I see, though, that's bad. I can be attracted by the wrong thing.
Right.
And it can seem profound, but it's not. How do I get out? Well, St. Augustine provides that kind of antithesis. He goes to the same depth and deeper. And he's not a plaster saint. He goes to the same depth and deeper. Say, no, this is better.
Yes.
This is the answer. This is something that outshines, way more attractive, way more joyful, way more light.
That's a very Catholic approach too. It was always interesting to me that the communists would use excerpts from Pope Pius XI's encyclical against communism to, as they said, he said it better than we did. They just didn't give us
Yeah, they didn't even get a footnote on it, huh?
Thank you so much for being with us and for coming to do this series. And may the Lord bless all of you and keep you and shine his face upon you. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. You know, we can have people like Dr. Ben Weicker and all the other folks who do series because you bring this network to you. You make it possible by your gifts and generosity. And so we ask you to please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. And God willing, we'll be able to pay all of our bills too. Thank you very much.